Disclaimer: as far as progression and story, I've gotten to Stormblood and am a few quests in. This video is meant to address Heavensward and everything before it, however, which is the extent of the free trial, since it was updated semi-recently. Let me officially begin by saying I never intended to play this game for longer than a week or two to maybe throw out a video on it, assuming it was worth doing so. The stars have apparently aligned, however, and I now have every expansion and plenty of subscription time courtesy of a now good friend whose only request was that I appreciate the story on my way through. I'm so glad it turned out this way. In this video, I will give my honest opinion on Final Fantasy XIV, henceforth referred to as 14 for my sanity, with an admittedly uncharacteristic focus on the storyline. As usual, this will be more of a first impression style of video with notable points I've come across, and will not constitute a fully in-depth review. As such, if I've missed systems or notable components, please leave a comment letting me know, and feel free to discuss down below. Let's boogie. First and foremost, I love this game. 14 is fantastic, no pun intended, from my point of view in both mechanics and story, and I'll try to explain why I think that here. I will also be adding in some notable details that a couple of friends have offered to flesh out a complete newcomer's view. For absolute basics, Final Fantasy XIV is an MMORPG set in a science fantasy setting with a traditional tab targeting combat system and a very theme park MMO feel, with a huge focus on story and PvE, though some PvP is present. I'll refrain from mentioning the PvP again as I haven't messed with it yet. You can purchase the base game for $20, which will give you a month of free playtime, or the complete edition for $60 that includes all expansions and also 30 days of subscription time. Additionally, you will be required to pay $13 a month for the subscription, although there are some bonuses rewarded for paid time that offer more in-game time, some outfits, etc., at least in the first few rewards. It's a bit expensive, I admit, but I believe that the game provides excellent quality of life and a fantastic story for the price of entry and maintenance. Also, there is a free trial that you can play until you pay your first bit of game time that lasts all the way to level 60 now, which includes the base game and the first expansion. If you're on the fence or don't think it will play for too long, this offers plenty of content for literally nothing. I don't talk about story often, especially in MMOs, but 14 demands personal attention in the best way. It starts off somewhat slowly in A Realm Reborn, which is the starting base game, but offers a few surprisingly potent emotional gut punches near the end of that first quote-unquote arc. Heavensward, the first expansion, doubles down on those emotional beats and delivers many moments of awesome tragedy, heartwarming, you name it. I won't dive into it too much, but I will share one line out of context that almost made me legitimately cry. This line is delivered near a very low point in the Heavensward arc and hit me hard enough that I did have to take a break after the cutscene ended. The line is, "A smile better suits a hero." You'll see what I mean when you get there. That, however, is as far as I'll go on the main story here, lest I get into spoilers. I can, however, mention the side and class quests. Many side quests give you extra dungeons or more systems to work with, as depicted by a plus sign next to the quest marker. Even the quests that don't give you extra stuff like that often have entire storylines of their own, many of which are downright hilarious or incredibly deep as kind of a standalone experience. If you ever want to laugh, check out the Hildebrand questline whenever you get done with A Realm Reborn. Then there's the class quests, which give you abilities for your chosen class and function to give you the backstory on your chosen fighting style. Each of these is similarly in-depth, even classes you unlock later, such as the Dark Knight, which is usually agreed to have the best questline, and Gunbreaker, which I've had loads of fun with. They all have their own explanation for why you'd use those skills and how you learn them, if a bit ham-fisted in places. Many I've seen even have a place in the main storyline, such as Conjurer, which evolves into White Mage, that has a hand in maintaining peace and stability in the forest region of Gridania, often working with high-profile characters from the main story to do so. Even better, as each character has a class of their own, sometimes you'll run across a main character that makes a comment about it. The one that stands out is Lady Yugiri, who mentions at one point that I should try my hand at being a ninja. It's little details like that that make me really appreciate how much work has gone into this game. About mechanics now, I personally love them, but I can understand where someone would be a bit leery. The biggest hold I can imagine would be the notably long global cooldown, or GCD, being at 2.5 seconds. It sounds like a lot, but there's so many abilities that ignore the big GCD on most, if not all, classes that you always feel busy. I've made healers and tanks since starting, and have only really felt like fighting was a chore in a few situations that I was also grievously overgeared for. On that note, 14 works off of the holy trinity of class roles, that being tank, healer, and DPS, though with a twist. Every class functions as a DPS to a certain degree, meaning even if you're a healer and no one is taking damage, you will always have something to do. You can play pretty basically and get through most content without really being on your game, but to do the harder raids, you're going to need everyone in the party to be on point with mechanics, as well as staying on top of their actual jobs and DPSing. Might as well mention the classes here. All of them are unique enough to differentiate at a glance, even the DPS classes, which constitute the largest chunk. Within the DPS classes, you have melee, ranged, and magical subcategories, heavy air quotes there. Within each category, those being tank, healer, melee, ranged, and magical, you have a set of quote-unquote role abilities. These allow you to jump between classes within your role without being completely blind going into it. Many basic abilities are also similar. A good example would be the basic combos of melee classes, which often have 3 abilities meant to be used in a chain for extra damage or ability procs. Some get more complex, obviously, but the basics are often similar enough even between roles that you can get your bearings pretty quickly. As I've hinted at, you can also flip to any other class whenever you want to. For instance, I played mainly healer up until the start of Heavensward, where I hit level 60 far ahead of time. I then switched to Gunbreaker, which is a tank class, and have played that as my main ever since. Gear translates between classes in the same role to a certain level, which is very nice when jumping, say, between ninja and monk, trying to figure out what kind of DPS you want to be. Later on, the gear is more specialized, but by that point you'll likely know which one you like most. Even if not, you'll have plenty of chances to kit out a new class as you progress through the main story, either through actual story rewards or raids that you can repeat for resources to buy new kit, or kit looted from the raids itself. I mentioned earlier that you have the potential to get loads of dungeons to run through, including small 4-man raids, bigger 8-man full party raids, and huge 24-man alliance raids, all of which are solid, with some exceptions being frankly tedious to work through. A fair number of these are story related and you're required to run through them to advance, but there are great rewards for doing main story quests like that. So veterans are often running through them enough that getting in won't take too long. In fact, these MSQs, as many call them, give the most elegant tomestones that I've seen so far, which you can use to buy some fantastic role-specific gear at level 50 and 60 at least. They're also a good place to get goofy, since they take a while and everyone is usually in a goofy mood anyway. The leveling process itself is pretty solid too. The main story quest offers a massive load of XP every time you turn in a quest during the main story arcs, plenty and then some to keep you above the level requirements for each quest. This is in addition to the daily leveling roulettes, quote unquote, which give you a random dungeon or raid with a big experience boost. If balanced well, you can pretty safely have a main class for the storyline and use the duty finder to level another class alongside for some variety. You could also just take a DLC class if you have the means, say Gunbreaker or Red Mage, that starts at levels 60 and 50 respectively, which gets you through those super early levels and right into the higher tier action. These classes also give you a set of basic gears, so you have a good start on whichever one you choose. That's about it for the overarching things, so now I'll get into some smaller details I think are worth noting. A couple of friends have also weighed in with their own observations for some alternate points of view. Noxie, the lovely person who gifted me with the game in the first place, happy birthday by the way, mentioned that at later raids it functions similar to traditional MMOs with the loot system, with a notable twist. As I understand it, you do a raid and get a piece of gear at random, which can be for any class. Obviously this is less than ideal if you're going to specifically focus on, say, warrior. However, you do apparently get a token which, once you have enough of them, you can trade for a piece of that same gear of whatever type you want. So even if you have the worst possible luck and only care about one class, you will still make progress, albeit a bit slowly. I personally think this is a good way to balance RNG with consistency at endgame. In it, yeah, another YouTuber and the person who got me into the game in the first place mentioned that the map is a bit annoying with elevation, and I am tempted to agree. You can still see differences in altitude, but it's so subtle that it pretty much fades into the background on the minimap, and even with the full map page, whatever you call it, it's still pretty hard to see. You will very likely have issues determining your path at least once during your playthrough, but after a few objectives in a map, it won't be too much of an issue. I've also been told that in later maps it gets a lot better. Once you get into mid-levels, around 50 to 60, leveling slows down if you're only using one method. Specifically, if you play the story a fair bit and want to catch up a class through roulettes alone, the story quests are by far the most effective way to level up, but if one class gets ahead of the others, you'll have some trouble catching up if you rely only on the daily bonuses. You can still run roulettes without the daily bonuses, but the rewards are significantly lesser, though this can be mitigated if you have some comical friends to run them with. Alternatively, you can make up the difference by doing every roulette with the class you mean to level, but depending on the daily playtime, it's still a touch slow, and for me, leveling DPS when I usually play tank or healer is painful due to the longer queue times. They're not absolutely horrendous, but the traditional quote-unquote support classes get much better queue times due to a lack of population playing them, at least as of the recording of this video. This is mitigated once you get a class to level cap, by the way, as you get a pretty sizable experience bonus, but I haven't experienced that yet, so I can't really talk about it. Lastly, I'm not happy with the fact that there are data centers and worlds within those data centers to split up the player base. If you're on the same data center as a friend, but a different world within that data center, you can still play with them, but will have to reset your quote-unquote home world to join the same guild. I understand the need to split the player base for performance, but this method, especially in a subscription-based game, kinda bothers me. Maybe I'm just not familiar with the common practices of MMORPGs as I come from a more shooter-based background, but still. All in all, I think it's a bit of a high price to get into the game, but you have that trial to figure out whether or not you'll find it personally worth the cost. I feel comfortable in saying that the trial alone makes trying the game worth your time, just to see the story, to say nothing of the PvE content offered. It's a wonderful game with so much personality that deserves as much attention as it can get. 14 surprised me and has since eaten a couple hundred hours in my month of playtime, and I haven't even touched the crafting system, to say nothing of others that I probably don't even know about. And that's it, before I get too ranty, as I tend to do. If you have any questions, drop me a comment and I'll be happy to answer. If you want someone to play with or show you the ropes, I have a Discord channel that will be linked down below, and currently play mostly on the Crystal data server, Goblin World. I do also have a character on the EU side, specifically the Light data center and the Odin world, however we're supposed to say those. Raids are much more fun with friends after all. If you liked the video, drop me a like, and if you'd like to see more, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so YouTube Senpai remembers I exist. I'll try to remember to make a follow-up video once I hit level cap and the end of the storyline, but that could be a ways out, so be sure to keep in the know for that. Plenty of videos on the way in the meantime. Have a wonderful day! I'll see y'all next round.